great. Wonderful. And then we'll just get in. Thank you. Thanks, Terry. And you can see I'm not laptop qualified here. I wanted to talk about a collection that we have here at the Historical Society Library, which is not actually a new collection. We've had it for many years. In fact, I think we had it before we moved to this building in 1990. But we thought this was a perfect opportunity to talk to and maybe a new audience that wasn't aware that we had this collection, and also talk a little bit about an effort that we've undertaken to promote it and to make it more accessible. And the collection I'm talking about is the Kenyon Bar collection. And just to explain what that is and how we came to have it, it is a collection produced by the City of Cincinnati Planning Department, and it is about 3,200 black and white photographs and about 23 or 24 maps depicting every structure that was in the West End immediately prior to the first wave of clearing. So these are photographs that were taken in the spring and summer of 1959, and what the city did was document every structure, every residential structure, every commercial structure, every vacant lot, and even some alleys were photographed. And we have here in our collection these approximately 3,200 photographs. We have the original source negatives to those photographs, and we have the maps. And I'll show you if I can make this work right. First of all, this is a map from the collection, and it's the key to the 23 or 24 sectional maps. And of course, you're familiar with the area within the checked boundaries here, which is the so-called Kenyon Bar redevelopment area. And all of the photographs that we have depict the structures and lots that were in the area within the checked boundaries. And the blue numbers you see are actually the individual maps. Now, the photographs. And if you lived in the West End at the time, in 1959, maybe you remember when the city came around and took these documentary photographs. Of course, it's on the one hand a sad thing, because when these folks showed up and started taking these photographs, that really was an indication that everything was going to change. But the city created this wonderful record of what was in the West End at that time. And of course, down here the street grid isn't even the same anymore, so it's difficult for someone who didn't know the West End before to even understand what it looked like, where the streets were, the kind of community it was. So these photographs are a great resource. The thing that we've started to do, I mentioned we've had this collection for a long time, but in order to make it more accessible for people, we have begun digitizing them. So we've begun scanning these photographs. Of the 3,200, we've scanned about 1,000, and I think 300 or 400 of those have been uploaded to our website, and I'll talk about how to access that in just a second. So if you lived in the West End, you want to know if we have a picture of your house or a business or a church that you want to know if it's been photographed, you can access the website, look to see if it's been scanned yet. Eventually we'll get them all online, and then we'll scan the maps. If not, you can contact the library, because the physical photographs are also available for research. Here's another from Bar Street. And actually, we're scanning them alphabetically, so if you lived on Bar or Carr or Cutter, you're in luck, because we've already done your street. And then this is one of the 23 or 24 maps, sectional maps depicting the structures. So the photographs have a code on them. The code refers to the map and the location of the structure, so people who are doing research on the West End can see exactly where things were located. And just a word about how can you access it. You can go to the library's website directly at library.cincymuseum.org, or you can go to Cincinnati Museum Center's main website and just click on the prompts to navigate to the library website. You can click on photographs and type in Kenyon Bar, and there you are. You can look through what we've got and come back from time to time, because we'll continue to add the photographs until we have the whole group of 3,200 online. Or if you don't have computer access, or your street hasn't been scanned yet, or the thing you're looking for is not on the website, you can always call the library at 287-7030, or you can email us at library@cincymuseum.org, and somebody from the staff will help you. They'll look up an address for you if you want, or they will help put you in contact with a photo curator or somebody that can help you get a copy of what you're looking for. And I want to say just one final thing. Although this Kenyon Bar collection is a great collection, it is by no means the only thing we have on the history of the West End. We have lots and lots of resources in the library here, and we continue to collect things relating to the West End. And I want to just mention a tool that we have on the website that's, I think, a good way to access some of the things we have on the West End, and also the broader topic of the history of African Americans in Cincinnati, and that is what you see on the screen here, the Guide to 20th Century African American Resources. And what this is it's our access point that we've created to all of the various things we have in the collection that relate to topics, individuals, organizations, churches, and issues that were of importance to the African American community and to the city. When you click on it, there are thumbnail biographies, like if somebody was doing research on Theodore Berry and they wanted a quick bio of Berry, there's one of those on the website. There's capsule histories of various organizations and so on. And then you can search it by, we have a number of access points. You can search it alphabetically, you can search it by subject. You know, there's a number of ways to get in it and use it. And for people who are doing more in-depth research, as you mine down through these topics, you'll see that there's a list of all the things we have in the collection, manuscripts, photographs, printed works, whatever we have on these various topics. All of it's available to the public. You can use it in the library, which is open to the public. And I want to say just one thing about this, which is interesting. We launched this tool on our website in 2004, and within 1 month of launching this, the web traffic to the library website doubled, and it's never gone down. And that shows you that there's a high level of interest in what went on in Cincinnati, because things happened here that happened elsewhere in the country, and there are researchers that have never heard of Cincinnati Museum Center who are finding, through Google searches, finding this tool, going into our website and finding these collections and using them. So it's been a great thing for us, and it's a great thing for the research community, and that's why we have this effort to continue to get things online and to make them as accessible as possible. And if people have questions about the collection, I'm going to stick around, and at the end I'll answer them if I can, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about these West End collections. Thank you.
Great job, Scott. Again, another round of applause for Mr. Gamfer. And bear with me, folks. Let me tee this up. The next person I would like to introduce is a gentleman that's near and dear to my heart. He is a gentleman who's impacted our community in a very positive way. His family has done tremendous things to move our community forward. This gentleman, who many of us know and love and who is dear to our hearts, will then have a few comments about John Harshaw. Representative William L. Mallory, a native of Cincinnati's West End. Representative William L. Mallory Sr. was born in 1931. He was the son of a casual laborer. And please forgive me for reading this. There's so many accolades that Mr. Mallory has achieved. I have the abridged version, and I don't want to misspeak, and so I need to read this. So please forgive me for that. His desire to be successful and his interest in politics propelled him to the Ohio House of Representatives and to years of service to the community. Despite being a high school dropout, Mallory later graduated from East Vocational High School and entered Central State University in 1951. He later received an honorary Doctor of Law degree, and the street was later named after him at Central State University. In 1966, William Mallory Sr. was elected to the Ohio House of Representatives, the beginning of a 28-year career in the Ohio legislature. 8 years later, he was elected Majority Floor Leader, the first African American to hold that position. Mr. Mallory Sr. retired in 1994, holding the record of being the longest serving Majority Leader in Ohio's history and the longest serving Ohio representative from Hamilton County. During his service in the General Assembly, William Mallory Sr. sponsored or co-sponsored over 600 pieces of legislation. Again, over 600 pieces of legislation. A highlight during his tenure was when he filed and won a lawsuit which allowed the black judges to be elected to the Hamilton County Municipal Court. He is currently heading up the Cincinnati Black Brigade Memorial that will culminate in the erection of a monument in the spring of 2012. This will honor the men of the Black Brigade. He was also recently selected by the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber as a Great Living Cincinnati. It is my pleasure to introduce Representative William L. Mallory, Sr.
Welcome to this historic event. I thank the Cincinnati Museum Center for making this facility available. The Union Terminal provided a great resource for the residents of the West End. I spent many days and nights here at the Union Terminal. I slept many times at night on the grass when it was too hot to sleep in our tenements. But I want to say this about John Harshaw. I want you to realize that John Harshaw has bestowed upon us a great gift. His book will allow us to relive all of our memories. The people of this neighborhood face many struggles and burdens. Despite this, we achieved and excel in many areas. I hope this book will inspire future generations of Cincinnatians and others across this nation. Thank you.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Mr. Mallory. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our distinguished lecturer for this evening, Mr. John Harshaw, Sr., who was born and raised in the West End. He attended 12th District Elementary School, Euler Junior High, Taft High School, the University of Cincinnati, and the University of Tennessee School of Executive Management. Along with William Clark, he was the first African-American teller to work at a major bank in Cincinnati, Ohio. He became president of Magnolia Federal Savings in Knoxville, Tennessee, and served on several boards of directors, including Knoxville College and the University of Tennessee Chancellor's Board. Mr. Harshaw taught at the Institute of Banking and the FDIC. He served in Washington, D.C. as president of the American League of Financial Institutions, which is a trade association for over 200 financial institutions owned and operated by African Americans, Asians, and Hispanics in the United States, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Mr. Harshaw conducted workshops for the largest Japanese banks and financial institutions in West Africa. Mr. Harshaw also served as a member of President George Bush's Senior Committee on Small Business and President Bill Clinton's Committee of Health Insurance Reform. He is the proud father of John Jr., April, Gianna, and the grandfather of 9. 9? His first book, Jazz on a Broken Piano, is based on a true story of lust and murder in the West End in the 1950s. If any of you are interested in knowing more or receiving a copy of Jazz on a Broken Piano, please see Mr. Harshaw afterwards. But it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce my uncle and the person that I hold very near and dear to my heart, Mr. John Harshaw, Sr.
First, I want to thank God for this opportunity. I'd like to welcome the ancestors to gather around us, those ancestors that grew up here in the West End who've passed on, those that slept here, walked here, laughed here, cried here, and died here. And I'm honored to have this opportunity to tell their story, some of your stories, and those things that happen in this place that we call the West End. I want to thank the staff for all their help, Dr. Matthews, Terry, and special, back in the back, is Clara Matanozzi, who has been a special help, and I want to thank her personally for everything that she's done. Hit my notes off here. Okay, I'm trying to make this thing work. Blacks migrating from the South were drawn to Cincinnati, particularly by the promise of stable jobs in the steamboat industry. The city had only 690 blacks in 1826, but the number grew to 3,731 by 1860. Many of these newcomers, black and white, settled on the periphery of the central business district and commercial district in an area below Western Row, which was Central Parkway and Mill Creek. This area became known as the West End. And at the lower tip, in the bottoms, along the Ohio River, a black community arose that was derogatorily known as Little Bucktown or the Swamp. And I lived in the bottom. There were 40,000 people of all ethnicities that lived in the West End. This picture of Fenton cleaners, and if any of you took your clothes to the cleaners, you know Fenton was the upscale cleaners. You know, if you felt like, I got to get this back and it's got to be done right, you took it to Fenton's because it was the place to go. If some of you remember at Clark and Freeman, the Wong family had a laundry right at there, and Tony Wong went to Taft, grew up there, went to Taft, graduated from Taft, was in the first graduating class, and I had hoped that he could make it here tonight. There were 9,800 families that lived in this community. 2,800 residential, commercial, and retail structures. It was an ordinary day when my father, Von Morton Sr., made the decision to leave Boykin, Alabama, and head north to Cincinnati, Ohio. Like his ancestors, he was a cotton farmer, and on this particular day, he was trying to sell his small cotton harvest at the local cotton buyer's small enterprise. Instead of the price offered to the local white sellers, he was offered the very low Negro price. My father was not an educated man, but he was smart and defiant. Instead, he drove 20 miles farther, got his price, came home, told my mother, Ursie Coleman Morton, that we were leaving Alabama, leaving behind 91 acres of land with inherent oil and mineral rights. My father packed the family in his pickup truck and headed north, Jenks Morton. And many of you know Jenks is sitting here on the front, came all the way from Washington to participate, and he's been a lifelong friend, and I appreciate him coming. And for those that I'm still seeing it. Yeah. For those of you that don't know about Jenks, he left the West End community, went to Taft in that great class of 1959, went on to play with a stint with the Cleveland Browns, and then became the manager for Sugar Ray Leonard and a lot of heavyweight, lightweight, and middleweight champions of the world. So it's one of those stories of a little boy in the West End who woke up one day and went on to do well, as many of us did. In between 1940, there was a sandwich. The 1937 flood came. I remember my mother saying she was in a boat out on the water, afraid that gasoline would ignite the boat and they would all drown. But they made it. When men came to the Union Terminal here, those that were from Cincinnati could only work as redcaps. If you had started working for the railroad, as my grandfather did when he was 12 in Ellijay, Georgia, and worked 56 years for the railroad, you could continue your occupation. And he was a tapper. And when he came to Cincinnati, he was able to continue in that process of being a tapper. But most of the local men here could only be redcaps. At its heyday here at Union Terminal, there were 216 trains a day. leaving and going from this place. And it was a busy place, as many of you know. And right to the right of where we came in the entrance at the Amtrak station was the colored waiting room. And when we got ready to head south to Tennessee or to Georgia, that's where we waited. But it was always a great trip. And as stated, we slept outside on the lawn in the summer. Nobody bothered us. Okay. We played football in the middle of the grass, going straight down the middle. That's where Bill Clark learned to play football. Okay. And sometimes we even had a football. Most time it was a brown paper bag. It's filled with rags, and you toss that around. And as we grew and got more sophisticated, and Donald Lindsay will remember, we chipped in and we bought a helmet. And then each guy that was getting ready to run got the helmet. So the opposition always knew, okay, who got the helmet? He's going to run. But we also came in here. There was the arcade on the left that we played. We sneaked in the 10-cent toilets because we didn't want to pay for them. And we ripped and ran through here. So many of the people coming here to Cincinnati came here by way of the train and came here through Union Terminal. Now there was a big wave of people around 1915. Everybody started to leave the South because of Jim Crow and all the things that were going on. There was a wave of uneducated, farm-driven people. There was a wave of very educated, affluent black people who had been educated at Knoxville College, at Meharry, at Tennessee State, and other places that came. There was a large group of mulatto blacks that came to Cincinnati that settled outside of downtown or the West End. 90% of all the mulattoes that came to Cincinnati settled outside the West End. 90% of all the dark-skinned blacks that came to Cincinnati settled in the West End. If you look out, come on, slide. If you go up the street past St. Joseph, on the right-hand side, there's a memorial that commemorates the other thing that sandwiched 1940 and the flood, and that was the war. And there's an honor roll there to those men who lived in the Lincoln courts, who fought in the war, and their names are on that list. A lot of them you'll remember. Mr. Stargle's name is on that list. Mr. Webster Posey's name is on that list. Mr. Fred Suggs' name is on that list. So sometime when you're driving by, just take a casual stop, take a look at it, and remember those people. The other event that happened during the war was the Pittsburgh Courier started a thing called the Double V campaign. And it was for victory at home and victory abroad. And basically it said, if we're going to go to war in a foreign country, then we want to make sure when we come home that there's opportunities for us. And this was started by a man named James G. Thompson in Wichita, Kansas, of the Pittsburgh Courier. And it affected everybody, everywhere, every black. And there was a large chapter of the Double V campaign here in Cincinnati. As a matter of fact, a young lady that went to Tennessee was elected the queen of the Double V campaign here in Cincinnati, Ohio. When they came, they traveled back. They went back and forth, back to see the land, back to see the relatives. But they had to have one thing that was very important. It was called the Green Book. And the Green Book was very important for black people traveling on the highways in those days, because it told you safe places that you could stay, safe places you could eat, safe places you could get your hair done, safe places you could get a pair of shoes, and everything as you travel. This book was a later copy because the original book was free, and you just had to send a dime for the mailing. But it was very essential. And all of those places that were in the Green Book for Cincinnati, 90% of them were in the West End, places where people came to stay and get their hair done. Okay. The Man's Hotel out in Walnut Hills was one of those other places that was outside the West End where people came and stayed. Now, everybody that lived in the West End, whether they will admit it or not, were involved in some way with the numbers. Okay. You either played them, you ran them, okay, or you were involved in some kind of way with them. And this is a numbers dream book. And it was essential. You had to have a dream book so that if you had a dream at night, you could look it up and say, what was my dream? Roses. Oh, I got to play 682. And if you wanted to be sure, you boxed it. Because if you boxed it, no matter how the number came out, you had a winner. Okay? And the dream book was essential. And sometimes you could get up and you say, well, I dreamed about a horse. A horse is 582, and the number may have come out another number, and when you looked it up again, it said stallions. You said, it was stallions. It wasn't a horse I should have played. Stallion, a horse number, okay? Most of those people, you remember Frank Screw Andrews, okay? Mr. Whitley's daughter is here tonight. I'm glad she came. I appreciate her coming, and we're going to talk later on because my next book is going to be about those men who were involved in the numbers in the West End. And it's not a book about gangsters. It's a book about men who saw an opportunity, who went out when there was money to be made, who reached their hands beyond their pockets and helped a lot of people in this game called the numbers racket. Okay. I was a numbers runner for my grandmother, who ran a book for Melvin Clark. And I had a special talent in that I could remember the numbers. When I came to your house, you gave me your number and gave me the money. I could go back to my grandmother, book it, but I could remember the number. So when the police came in and tried to find policy slips, we'd throw them in the coal stove. But when they left, I remembered, so we could rebook them. But it was always fascinating to me to see the policeman try and reach in that coal stove when you threw those slips in there, because as you know, a pot-belly stove could burn a car up. You could put an automobile in there and it would burn up pretty quick in a coal stove, okay? Because it was that same coal stove that you took your bath with, your once-a-week bath in the zinc tub. And sometimes some of you were fortunate, the girls were fortunate because they got to get their own water. I washed after my sister and my brother, okay? So I got whatever dirty water was left to wash in, okay? I know you remember peanut jam. Peanut Jim Shelton came from South Carolina, but he was a genius. He was the first franchise that I ever knew of, because he would walk through the neighborhood with his little wagon and cart, had a roaster on it, and he'd give you a sample of a peanut. He'd say, here, take a sample. Because he knew if you ate that one peanut, you had to have that bag, okay? You had to get that 5-cent bag. And my grandmother would say, don't take that peanut. Don't take that peanut, okay? Because she knew you had to get his peanuts after that, okay? He franchised it in that he had several men around the city taking their little wagons and roasters and peanuts and selling them everywhere. He was a staple at Crosley Field for many a years. And when they built the new stadium, they would not allow him to come around the stadium to sell his peanuts because they wanted the vendors inside to make the money. Peanut Jim didn't care, because by then he was very rich. He owned a lot of real estate down on Liberty Street and other places. He ended up getting a medal from the President of the United States. And so he died a happy man. He was not unhappy with that process, but he was the first real big businessman that I saw as an example of a good man in the West End. Now you remember Caldon. Now I want to tell you that this book, Cincinnati West End, is over 400 pages. So it has a lot of stuff in it, and a lot of it that I won't be able to cover. But it has a lot of information. But Caledonia I had to put in because all of you remember when Louis Jordan came out with his song, Caledonia, Caledonia, what makes your big head so hard? Ma. Well, this Caledonia's name was Marie Jackson, and she was born Valentine's Day, 1921 in Lexington, Kentucky. She later moved to Cincinnati and started a vaudeville career. She was not the Caledonia of Louis Jordan's song, but she made everybody believe that she was. Because everywhere she went, she kept her tap shoes around her neck, and whatever event was going on at the square, I don't care if President Eisenhower was coming in, she tapped. If there was a parade going down the street, she tapped. If there were entertainers at the Cotton Club, she tapped. But she was very essential in this city of entertainers and those special people that we had here in the city. We had other characters in the West End. If you remember Wawa, okay. Wawa was the guy that your parents would frighten you with, like the boogeyman is gonna get you, okay? That if you don't act right, Wawa is gonna get you, okay? And we were told that you should never run away from Wawa, because if he ran past you, the breeze that he left would give you pneumonia. So we never ran away from him. Then there was Vine Street Betty. Okay, and I know a lot of you have had that encounter with Vine Street Betty. Okay, I understand that Vine Street Betty's mother wanted a girl. So when he was born, she dressed him up in girls' clothes. Okay, he had a blonde, wavy hairdo, muscles bigger than any wrestler or fighter you could ever see. And if you messed up, you got to fight. And Vine Street Betty didn't mind fighting all the way down Vine Street to take you back to your neighborhood safely. That was Mr. Cullors. And Mr. Cullors had been accused, falsely arrested for something he didn't do, and he vowed that would never happen to him again. So he wore all types of crazy colors. He had a blue checkered sock, a pink shirt, a red hat, a yellow blouse, anything. And he rode around on a bike with a flag that had a raccoon tail on it and all kind of things like that, because he didn't want to be accused of doing anything wrong again. We had Mr. Jack, that when winter came, he said, cold, I got good cold. When summer came, he said, ice, I got good ice. And we had Mr. Jack Pratt, who strolled down the street in a straw top hat with his cane, and he'd get to the curb, tip his hat, spin around, and strut down the street. But those were people in our community who were colorful people who brought joy to our hearts and have lasted in our memories forever. And they were all special people. Some of you are old enough to have gone to the Cotton Club. I was old enough to sit outside and get a penny or 2 cents for taking that jug inside to get it refilled with beer. My daddy hung out there in a white zoot suit and caused my mother to leave him. Because that's where he liked to hang out. You know, he worked the railroad with my grandfather, but every chance he got, he went to the Cotton Club. And all the entertainers of the time came to the Cotton Club, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, you name them, the greatest entertainers. And Duke Ellington is by far the most prolific composer in the history of the world, not just America, but the world. He composed over 15,000 pieces of music in his lifetime. And that's a lot of music. But you had other people down. You had the Baby Ray Review, which was a lot of gay guys with a lot of plumes, a lot of feathers, and a lot of butt shaking. And they went on at the Cotton Club. But, oh, yeah. Now you look at this and you say, wow, she's a pretty lady. This was the most prominent female impersonator in Cincinnati at the time at the Cotton Club. This was Dixie Lee. And the Cotton Club was owned by Miss Lulu Ferguson. She also owned the Ferguson Cab Company. And she was a great entrepreneur, just like Cora Jameson. Cora Jameson owned the Cora Jameson Funeral Home and some other enterprises. So we had a lot of female entrepreneurs in that community, probably more small businesses then than we have today. Okay. Lulu Ferguson also ended up as an escort for Ezra Charles, the heavyweight champion of the world. Okay. Now, some of you swam here. Some of you got thrown in the pool here. Some of you learned to swim here. And some of you, like me, almost drowned. Trying to be smart. Okay, and I'm going to go over to 9 feet and just see what it's like. And behind me comes another kid and pushed me in there. And I almost drank all the water out of the pool before I came up. But I survived it. And Lincoln Center was that place that we went, we played. I know Rats here, Dennis, a whole bunch of us, when Mr. Mack was at Lincoln Center. And we would go there and under his tutelage and mentorship and play basketball. Now, if you came to Lincoln Center thinking you're going to win a basketball game, you came to the wrong place because Mr. Mack was on the clock, okay? If he was down 3 points with a minute to go, it took about 15 minutes for that 3 minutes to move. But just as soon as his team went up 1 point, game over. End of the time, we're out, we gotta go, okay? But they had dance classes for the young ladies. They had a whole lot of things that people could go to and find relief and stay out of the streets. And we were very fortunate to have these people down there and that they would take the time. And I always thought it's their job. You know, they come down to the Y, they come to the boys club. But they were taking time away from their families and away from everybody else to give us a chance, to give us a shot. And to this day, I'm honored and I'm grateful. Now, you others that live by Stowe School, you had Senton Pool, okay? And that's where I met Crip, Robert Hill. He wanted to push me in the pool. I didn't mind because it was just 3 feet. Okay? So you could just go in there and stand up. But also at Senton, you had all of those people that were interested in the kids, that spent time with them. And I know Artie Matthews, who was policeman, his thing was to make sure you scrubbed your knees before you came in the pool. And he would examine your knees when you get ready to go jump in the pool. And my 6th grade teacher, Miss Broxelegger, didn't understand that for a lot of black people, that was not dirt. That was just dark skin. And they would make you go back and get the scrub brush and just try and scrub and scrub and scrub, not knowing that she's trying to make you take your skin off your knees, you know, because she thought that it was dirt. Okay. I want to go back here to one. Yeah, the Sweethearts of Rhythm. They were frequent at the Cotton Club. And they came from a school in Mississippi that produced the 5 Blind Boys. After they started to become very popular and tour the country, they had to split up and become different groups so they could appear at different places. And as you can see, it was a great mixture of people. So when they would hit some places in the South that were segregated, then the Asians, the Hispanics, and those others, and the one white that was in the group, would say they were mulattoes, so they could all stay together and not have to be broken up and go to different places. If you went to 9th Street Y, You know the Scoutmaster. Okay. There were all those people there, Harry Wade, Mr. Vinegar, Mr. Walters. We had clubs. We had Defenders, High Wire, Alpha High Wire, Delta, and we played against each other. And if you were fortunate, you paid 15 cents, and on Thursdays you went to canteen. At canteen you could dance, you could play basketball, you could bowl, you could swim, okay, you could play basketball, you could run around the track every Thursday for 15 cents. On Thursdays you could go there, and for some of the guys it was the first time we learned to dance, and we'd be at home practicing our grind move in front of the mirror, you know, trying to get it right. And, you know, we'd ask our sister, okay, is this it? Is this it? Waiting on our chance to get down to the Y or some other place that we could enjoy dancing with those people. Okay, there's Mr. Reed. He was at the Boys Club at Wade Street, Percy Reed, and then he came up to 9th Street Boys Club, where we played basketball. He taught me to play shoot pool. And then it was a unique place in that the basket, when you played basketball, was right up against the wall. So what you do is you could run, put your foot on the wall, and jump up and dunk off the wall, okay? So we said, wow, that's cool. So Donald and I lived down at 12th District School, okay? So I brought that down to 12th District, and we would intentionally wait on a bus going to Price Hill when it would stop in front of the school, and then we'd start our line, running up the wall and dunking, run up the wall and dunking. And I'm sure they said, wow, look at those guys. They got a lot of talent. I wonder if they can play. But we jumped off that wall and dunked the ball and everything else for a while. But Mr. Reed, like all of those people in the West End that cared about us and that nurtured us, and same here with William Mallory Sr., that made sure that we were on the right path. At the 9th Street Y, we learned Robert's Rules of Order in the 6th grade. We know how to make a motion, how to second a motion, how to vote it down, everything else when we were in the 6th grade. We went on field trips to different places, did different things, and one year the Defenders won the All-City Championship in basketball. But they had to get out of that gym real quick up at Central Y, because we weren't allowed to be in Central Y at that time, and we were just honored that we won the game, that they won the game, and they could get out of there alive. That was Finley Street Neighborhood House. Okay? Now, the only reason I went to Finley Street Neighborhood House was to play basketball. And the first time I went there to play a game, we were winning. Fat Man Calloway decided he wanted to fight. I saw a guy start grabbing people, just picking them by the neck and throwing them left and right. I said, oh, wow, look at this guy, man. So I went up and I said, what's your name? He said, my name is Jenks Morton. I said, I'm John Harshaw and I'm your friend. And we have been friends ever since then. And no matter through whatever, he's been there for me, I've been there for him. And I'm glad he came today. Wade Street Boys Club was another special place. Kids in the neighborhood could go and play. And even they had dance classes for guys down there. They used to bring different dance instructors down and teach you how to dance, teach you how to waltz, do the polka, and other stuff. And we learned. You had children's theater here in Cincinnati at the time. So as a kid, you could go to the theater, you could go to the opera, you could go to the children's symphony, you could go to the ballet, and for us guys, we had a knothole club. So you could go down to Crosley Field and see about 6, 7 games a year for free, okay? And drink that real stale lemonade that my brother passed around, okay? And Guest Street Recreation Center was another place, and Guest Street was special. I'm sorry? Oh yeah, for Guest Street Ballpark, that was the special place because all the baseball teams played down there. And I was the bat boy for Liberty and Dudley Cafe, who had some outstanding ball players. And even though Jimmy Wynn was one of our first athletes to go play professional baseball, his father and his uncle and all those guys that down at Guest Street Park were by far much better baseball players. But they could not go to the pros. There was no opportunity. And one of our classmates, well, he was a year ahead of us, Jenks, when Pete Rose signed with the Cincinnati Reds, he committed suicide because he knew he was a better ball player than Pete Rose. And he knew that Horace Mitchell, Jenks, and a lot of those other guys, Talmadge Boykin, Dennis Boykin, Roy Bernard, they were much better ball players than Pete Rose, but they didn't get that chance. This team, the Cincinnati Tigers, that played at Guest Street Park. Any of you remember Hog Jaw Turner? Mr. Kavanaugh, when you say, all right, hum that ball, Kavanaugh. And he was one outstanding pitcher. And Judith Poe's father, come off the mound, he was a big, tall guy, and he could hum it down there. This was fast pitch, either softball or baseball. And we had some guys that, when we used to play in the West End, Donald and I, we would play the fathers. And some of the guys would hit a ball like a mile and end up with a single because they had bad feet. Took them about 10 minutes to get to first base, tipping down that line, okay? But when the Cincinnati Tigers were there, and everybody is familiar with the history of the Cincinnati Reds. Let me hit to this here for a second. Not enough space on this podium. In addition to the Reds, there was another team here. It was a black team. It was called the Cincinnati Buckeyes. And they were established in 1942. And they changed their name to the Cincinnati Indianapolis Clowns in 1944. And in 1946, they became permanently the Indianapolis Clowns. Okay? Now, people that played with the Clowns at that time, Goose Tatum, that played with the Harlem Globetrotters, actually started his career with the Indianapolis Clowns. And the Clowns, when they would hit the field at Crosley Field was filled to capacity, more people than went to see the Redlegs. It was packed, okay? And they'd come out with what you call peppering. And peppering is you came out and you passed the ball around from home plate to second base and around to first base and back around. But they didn't have a ball. They'd act like they were throwing the ball, and the guys would snap their gloves and everything else. And then Satchel Paige, the great Satchel Paige, who was undoubtedly one of the greatest pitchers of all time, who made his rookie debut in pro baseball when he was 45. But he would come to Crosley Field, and he'd tell all the outfielders and infielders to sit down. Just sit down, take your time, I'm gonna strike everybody out. So you don't have to worry anything about anybody hitting the ball. And he would do it. He would do it. Now the young lady you see there in the picture, her name is Connie Morgan. She was 5'4", 135 pounds, second baseman. But she hit 300, playing with men, doubling up, batting third in the lineup. And when my father and my sister and I would take off for Crosley Field, when the Kansas City Monarchs, Indianapolis Clowns came to town, we had a long stride, and we'd stride down to Crosley Field, and my sister was short. 50 little bitty steps to keep up with us. But we'd get down to Crosley Field and get our seats, and all of those people that came through there, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, everybody, we saw them for almost nothing. And it was just a great time to be there and to share, knowing that here were these special people that had talent that would never or maybe never get a chance to play in the big league until later. They did end up playing the world champion New York Yankees and beat their butt pretty badly, okay? If you went to Harlem Faye up on Bar Street, now, if you were a young guy and you took a girl to Harlem Cafe and bought her a hamburger and fries, she was your girl. She couldn't date anybody else. If she saw a guy she liked and said, "Oh, hi, Steve," then he'd say, "Hey, didn't Harshaw take you to Harlem and buy you a cheeseburger?" "Yeah, you Harshaw's girl. I can't talk to you." But in this front side, you could go in, get chili, ice cream. They had little jukeboxes on the table. And they had that little pass-through window where the adults went in the back. And we often wondered, what goes on back there, okay? And one of these days, when I get old enough, I'm going to go back there and see what's going on. Unfortunately, by that time, it was torn down and it was gone. But it was one of those special places. Now, I would submit that Miss Gert's hamburgers were the best. And Miss Gert's deep dish apple pie, you would smack a policeman straight on the street to get that pie, because she had some good pie and some good hamburgers. Now, some of you may remember or you may not. On Thursdays in the West End, Heidelberg Meat gave away pig ears, pig feet, chitlins, hog maws, everything free. On Thursdays, you took your bucket, sometime 2 if you were smart, or you sent 3 kids, and you went to Heidelberg Meat to fill up those buckets with all of that stuff that was free. Now later, when they found out we were eating it a lot, and it was good, and they started charging us for it. Then later, it became a delicacy. You could go to New York and say, "We're having chitterlings." And I never knew what chitterlings were, because we ate chitlins. Okay? But you could go down to Conn's, you could go to Heidelberg on Thursdays and get it all filled up. And as I said, although there were days when West Enders found the cupboard bare and found themselves relegated to sugar sandwiches, lettuce sandwiches, or bread soaked in bacon grease, there was no loss of pride. No war tokens, welfare cheese, buttermilk, nor peanut butter made them feel inferior to anyone, because everyone was experiencing the same nutritional struggles. West End cooks could take scrap foods and turn them into delicacies. Residents ate brains and eggs, pig's tails and sauerkraut, fried and pickled pig feet, cow tongue, neck bones, raccoons, rabbits, squabs, fish head soup, fried and barbecued bologna sandwiches, Spam, Vienna sausages, hog's head cheese, catfish and cobs, chicken feet and dumplings, kidney stew, and on occasion, turtle meat. Now, every part of the chicken was consumed. Chicken gizzards, livers, necks, butts, backs, chicken wings, chicken breasts, guinea hens, roasters, which were older chickens, and fryers, which were the young chickens, were usually Sunday goodies. Now, my grandfather did not allow preachers in his house on Sunday. And he would tell them, "Do not come to my house on Sunday," because he knew Sunday was the day we're going to get chicken. And they were coming for the food. They were not coming for prayer, anything like that, okay? Now, compared to today, the big difference was the chickens were fresh, had no steroids, no antibiotics, or no other chemicals. And we had people that walked through the neighborhood in little push carts, and they'd sell you chicken, sometimes 3 for $1, off the back of carts and trucks, slaughter them right there, wrap them in some brown paper or some newspaper, and you were gone. Now, all of us had jelly jars. If you lived in a real nice house, you had a set of jars, and they matched. Okay? Our jars did not match. We had jelly jars of all kind, and you waited. You know, when the jelly company said, we're coming out with a new glass next month. It was kind of like a new television, a new movie. And you waited to get a new glass in addition to all the canning jars that you had around the house that you drank out of, okay? When oleo margarine came out, we discovered that butter was not yellow, that it was in fact white. And they gave you a little packet of yellow coloring dye that you put in it and made it yellow, and you put it in a little pack, and you had your, what we call butter. We rolled our own cigarettes. Okay, everybody had a little roller, which later became useful in another enterprise. But you had your pouch of tobacco, you had your papers, and you could roll your cigarettes and do all of that wonderful stuff. Some of you may remember Judge & Sons, which was a black grocery store that opened, I think it was up on 6th Street. Now, here was one thing about going to the grocery store in those days. There was no Visa, no MasterCard, but what we had was a little spiral notebook or a brown paper bag. And when you went in, you got your groceries, then the owner of the place put down the amount that you got that day, either in that book or on the brown paper bag. And if you paid weekly or monthly, you came in, you checked totals, and after you agreed, and most time, if your total was lower than the merchant's, he agreed with your total, and you paid him. And that was our Visa, and that was our MasterCard, because we had credit. The other thing you could do then is you could buy small portions. You could buy a nickel worth of bologna, 5 cents worth of washing powder, okay? And we had some, in our language in the West End, there was no white bread. We call it light bread. We knew nothing of Irish potatoes. We call them iced potatoes, okay? And if you gain weight in the West End, then the ladies would say, have you seen Beulah? She done picked up. And if she lost the weight, she fell off. When my grandmother got sick, my grandfather became the cook. And every day, we had green beans. And I went to 12th District School after she came back, and Miss Broxlegger, who was probably the best teacher I ever had in my life, would ask us, today is special. We're going to talk about nutrition and a balanced meal. So, John, what did you have? We had green beans. That's great, that's good, that's a vegetable. What else? Green beans. Did you have some meat? Oh yeah, there was a little stricoline in the beans, yeah. Yeah, it was just called stricoline because it just had one streak of lean and all of that fat, okay. She said, well, okay, how about dessert? I said, nope, no dessert. Salad? No ma'am, green beans. So we didn't have what they thought was a balanced meal in that West End, but we ate well. And my grandmother could sure enough cook. Now, I know you remember getting your Wilson milk label. If you save 122,000 Wilson milk labels, you could get a pot. Okay. Because it took everything you had to save all, and we would wrap them up and tie them up, and it was almost like your whole closet was filled up with Wilson milk labels, okay? Or you could get those, the labels off of your popsicles, and you save those and you turn them in. And on the popsicle, you could join the Hopalong Cassidy Club. Tom Holman and I saved enough labels to join, and they gave you a secret code book. But he and I were the only two members, so we didn't really need the code, okay? We could just talk to each other because nobody else in the neighborhood was in the Hopalong Cassidy Club. You also had H&S green stamps that came along later that you could save and get you some. But for Wilson milk, yeah, it took about 40,000 labels to get anything. The first African American child in 1809, and it was near the center of what was called Bucktown along Eggleston Avenue. Its pastor was William Allen, an early station of the Underground Railroad, and it was burnt and rebuilt 3 times from 1812 to 1815. And religion was important to all of us and a central part of our culture. When Pastor Allen became too sick to lead the congregation, it broke up. Members worshiped in white Methodist churches until 1824, when the second all-black and first nationally affiliated church opened. The second church, Allen Temple African Methodist Episcopal Church, was named for its founder, Richard Allen of Philadelphia, not Pastor Allen. Today, it is the oldest operating African-American church in the city. The African Union Baptist Church, now known as Union Baptist Church, was formed July 21st, 1831, when 14 African-American members of the Enon Baptist Church in Cincinnati decided to form their own congregation. This congregation, originally known as the African Union Baptist Church, was the second oldest African-American congregation in the city. St. Joseph, up the street. And you will remember back in the day, the entrance to St. Joseph was on Lynn Street. And it faced Lynn Street and you could go in. There were a lot of neighborhood house and all of that group. You could not cross over into each other's territory unless you wanted to fight, okay? Now, there was no murder. Nobody was trying to shoot you with a gun or anything like that. It was just territorial, and you just had to fight. I had the distinct honor of being able to go either side because my brother beat up everybody. Okay? So I didn't have to worry about it. I could just go where I wanted to go. But when you went to St. Joseph and the girls from the other side came and the girls from our side came, there were always fights because somebody was dancing with the other side's girls. So you had to fight. But still, it was this special place that you went to on Sunday. You could have a lot of fun, meet a lot of people, and it changed a lot of people's lives. Oh, there it is. Now, we had theaters. We had the one that's boarded up, originally called the Casino, then called the Regal, seated 1,400 people. We had the Lincoln, the Pinkin, the Dixie, the Roosevelt, the State, and the Hippodrome. Now, when you went to the Dixie, if you were smart and you went and got some popcorn, came back to your seat, you would have taken a little bit out and get the rats their share right away. Otherwise, they're going to be gnawing at you all night. So just, okay, there you go, my man. Then you could enjoy the movie. The uniqueness of the Lincoln, Pinkin, and the Dixie was they showed a lot of black movies. And in this is a black cowboy. This is Herb Jeffries in the white hat. And the other guy in the black hat there is Spencer Williams, that became Andy on the Amos and Andy show. And he was a prolific contributor to movie theaters. He made his own. And the Lincoln and Pinkin were national theaters where they could show black movies across the country: Chicago, Cincinnati, Washington, D.C., and New York. Okay? And Herb Jeffrey was a singer. He was an entertainer, great voice. But one time he was just walking around, some kids were playing, the kid was crying. He said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, I want to play cowboys and Indians, but there are no black cowboys." So he decided, I'm going to be a black cowboy. And that's how he got in this business. Now at the Regal, you started early in the morning. Started with the cartoon carnival. Bugs Bunny, Foghorn Leghorn, Heckle and Jekyll, all of the crew, Mighty Mouse. Okay. And then about 4:35 was what was called the early bird, and that was the cowboy. Okay. You saw Lash LaRue, Red Rider, Durango Kid, all of those cowboys that you rushed out of the theater pretending that you were him. At 6:30 or 7, all the entertainers that were the best entertainers in the world came on that stage at no extra cost. Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, Count Basie, Peg Leg Bates. Any entertainer would be like Beyonce and everybody else coming on, Michael Jackson coming on the stage for free after your movie. It costs 15 cents to get in the theater. My grandmother got us in free, so we never paid to go to the Regal. And other people would come to the Regal. They were fortunate they had enough money for Milk Duds, okay, a pop maybe. But they always wanted to get that special hot dog because, you know, the Regal and all the black theaters, they had hot dogs that make you smack your lips. And the disappointment later when we were allowed to go downtown to the Albee and RKO Palace, they didn't have any hot dogs. Cost $1. You saw one movie, okay? And they didn't have the talent that the ladies in these theaters had. They take that cup, put on the top of the soda, turn it over, and when it came out, never spilled a drop. It was right at the top, you know? And you could love it because it was just a special place. But while they were doing that, when my grandmother would come on Saturday, we had pot roast, collard greens, cornbread, apple pie, back in our special seat. So everybody was rushing over like they knew my grandmother, you know. Hi, Miss Harshaw. And we tell them, get away from me. You ain't getting no chicken, okay? You ain't getting nothing. And when we would leave Cincinnati on the train going south to wherever we were going, we rode in the last car. But everybody on the train exchanged. You would take your little box of chicken up and you would exchange your chicken leg for maybe a piece of cake or a hog head cheese sandwich for maybe a piece of pie. And you did that all the way to your destination. But the thing about the West End, more than its institutions, were its people. And before Hillary Clinton made it popular, the West End really raised the children. No matter where you went, discipline was waiting on you. And you knew if you messed up, not only did you get it there, you had one waiting when you got home. And anybody, Abe Faust, the Jewish grocer, I went in one time and I said a cuss word and he took me behind the counter and whipped my butt, called home, and I knew. And see, at my house, you got whooped in order. Like my grandfather was the man, my grandmother, my father, uncle, aunt, anybody that was older than you whooped you. So I learned after my first whooping, I don't want no more whoopings, okay? So I was a good kid after that because I didn't want to get it. There was no calling the police and saying, oh, I've been physically abused, and there was no time out, okay? Nobody had time out. Your time out was getting out, okay? And we didn't have a switch. My grandfather had a razor strap, and he would snap it You know, before he whipped you, he'd talk to you and say, well, you knew you was wrong. Pow! So, well, now you know the rules. Pow! And then he'd play with your mind. He said, okay, well, what time is it? I said, it's 2 o'clock. Okay, go on outside and play. I'm going to whip you at 6. So I go down the schoolyard. I'm playing baseball. Bases loaded. I'm up. St. Anthony's clock. Dong, dong. It's like for whom the bells toll, okay? And everybody knew, hey, Harshaw, it's 6 o'clock. Yeah, we going home with you, watch you get your butt whooped. And I'd go home, I'd wait, nothing. Take out my rollaway bed, get in the bed, nothing. Next day, off to school, come back, nothing. He come home from the railroad and say, hey, wasn't I supposed to whip you last night? I said, yes, sir. So what time is it? I said, 3. He said, well, go on outside and play. I'm going to whip you at 7. I said, no, you're going to whip me right now. I ain't going through that no more. You know, I'm not waiting around for that anymore. You're going to have to do your damage now. And I kept that razor strap for years, and I was the last one to use it on my nephew, and it just turned to powder. I mean, I hit him with it, and it I said, well, this is the end of an era here, you know, because, you know, when you had it coming, and a lot of people would, we'd go outside when the Spotswoods would get ready to whip their kids. We'd sit outside and say, okay, all right, who coming up next? That's Leon, ain't it? Yeah. Okay, look, oh, yeah, he done got him. He got him, man. Here comes Anna. Oh, she crying already. She crying already. But you peep through the window and watch all of that stuff happen. Now, you went to the Black Bear lot. If you say you didn't, I know you're lying to me. Now, the Black Bear lot was a special place. Postel's was the name of the little restaurant down there. We couldn't go inside, but we could go to the Black Bear lot, and you could get your a Met with sauerkraut on it, get that little white paper carton full of black beer, good Bach beer, and sit out in the lot. Now, it was one of the only places, and I was a young kid, and it was amazing to me to see people come home from work, take a bath, get dressed up, to go to a lot. In the Black Bear lot, they had singers there. They would sell all kind of goods there. You could get 3 chickens for $1. You could get 2 pair of shoes for $1 in the Black Bear lot. But it was just this amazing place. My Uncle Walter Mills, he hung out down there with his 13-string guitar singing the blues, okay? But it was just a special place that we went to, and it's part of that memory of the West End, the places that we hung out. Hudson Brothers Cleaners. This is Curlin Hudson, and he was born in 1915 in Devereaux, Georgia. Came to Cincinnati in 1922, graduated in 1946 from Western Hills. He was a pitcher on the baseball team, worked for General Electric. Then he later married Dorothy Berry and became a tailor by trade. In 1946, he and his brother Charles Hudson opened Hudson Brothers Cleaners and Tailoring Shop at Court and Bay Miller, and later moved to 808 Bay Miller between 8th and 9th Streets, between Long Coins Variety Store and the Hippodrome. And this is his wife in the cleaners at the time, and his 2 daughters. Now, Cookie and Dwayne were always in the cleaners, and George Cornell and Roy Bernard and all of them would always try and head down the Hudson Brothers, not to put any clothes in the cleaners, okay, because they wanted to see Cookie and Dwayne, and we would stand outside the cleaners and wait for them to open our clothes so we could see Dwayne and Cookie. When they closed, they were the oldest business in the West End, having been there for 62 years. I'm honored to say that in the room with us tonight, Sherman Flores stayed in business for 75 years. And those were the types of businesses that we had where people came, patronized, and kept things going. Television came. Radio came first, yeah. WCIN. Now, before WCIN, we had WKRC, WLW. The hit tune would be Tiptoe Through the Tulips. And we didn't really have any great music. But we had WLAC from Nashville, Tennessee. And late at night, Wolfman Jack came on the air, and WLAC, you could get the blues, gospel, R&B, symphony, country, western, because WLAC had a powerful station, went all the way to Canada, went all the way to California, okay? And it was the first time when WLAC started to spin all of those records of black R&B singers that it hit the South, and all those people in the South who had been segregated, crowds that had not been able to hear that music, were able to hear it. Unfortunately, when a black singer would make a hit, then Pat Boone would sing it. And a lot of white people thought it was Pat Boone's tune, okay? And that happened over and over again. Each time a black would come out with a tune, then a white singer would sing it, and they'd make a lot of money to go on. Now, when Joe Louis fought on the radio, again, people got dressed up, took a bath, and sat by the radio to listen to Joe Louis whoop somebody, because we knew he was going to beat up somebody. And after he won, everybody take off to the clubs, okay? Because Joe Louis had won again. We had Bug Scruggs, the man with the plugs, back on the scene with my record machine. We had Jackie Jack. And we had little Abraham, Isaac Jacob Swanson XII, who had a saying, "I hope you live 1,000 years and me one less, so I never know you passed away." When I was a kid, in the lot between our house, they came out and they were cleaning off the lot and everything, and then we saw a tent going up. My buddy Tom and I thought the circus was coming next door. Turned out it was little Abraham's revival. Didn't have any electric, so they ran the electric wire through the window, into the window where I slept. So I could not go to bed until they finished church. So they would shout and they would sing, and then little Abraham would take 6 women and stand them up front. And it cost a consecrated quarter to sit each one of them down. And I asked my grandfather, I said, "What is a consecrated quarter?" He said, "Well, it's a quarter that's been consecrated to God." I said, "Okay." And I yelled out the window, "Will somebody give him some of those quarters so I can go to bed?" Because I had to stay up all night, listening to the preaching, listen to him shout. But that was my man. Amos and Andy hit the radio. Everybody would run home, get by the radio, listen to Amos and Andy. Then television came. Amos and Andy made that transition, okay? Wrestling was on, and my grandmother believed it was real. So I don't care what we wanted to look at. When Gorgeous George came on, Little Beaver came on, Bobo Brazil came on with the cocoa butt, we had to watch it. Now, Gorgeous George had a saying, and it was, "Win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat." And he did that in the ring quite a bit. Now, for you young people that hear, there was no color television. But they said that every colored person had colored televisions. If you wanted color, there was a little piece of cellophane, red, blue, and green, that you stuck on the 9-inch or 12-inch screen, and we had 3 channels and no remote control. Okay? And I couldn't understand when the remote controls came out, say, oh, what is that? Oh, it's a remote control. You can sit in your seat and change the channel. Well, we all sit right in front of the television. You could reach the television from where you sat and turn to the 3 little channels that we had. So that was just amazing stuff to me. New Year's Day in the West End. And many of you know only a black man could come through your house on New Year's Day. There were no women allowed of any hue to walk through your house. Okay? Oftentimes, my father exchanged. He'd go to somebody else's house, walk through. Tom's father next door would walk through our house. But you had to do that. Then we came with the black-eyed peas to cook, the pig, and eating of the pig part was an event transferred from the winter solstice. In the summer solstice, good had conquered evil and darkness, and the evil souls were cast into the pigs, which was symbolic of the dark one. Therefore, eating the pig was emblematic of killing the associates of evil. But we did that. They cooked greens to symbolize you were going to have good fortune and have money that year. Some people took 12 black-eyed peas, put them in their wallet for luck each month of the new year. Easter in the West End, if you were lucky, you went to Cino's and you got you some pearl snap up flaps made. Okay? You went to Rosen's and you went to Ben's. Now, Ben loved you. So when you came into Ben's, he wanted to make sure when you left there, you had something. If you were leaving and he said, well, where's your bag? You didn't get anything. Well, I saw some shoes, but they cost $2.35. Ben's, oh, come with me. And he'd take you to the basement where he had those dollar shoes, okay? And he'd hook you up with 2 pair of dollar shoes before you left that store. But whoever you were when you were leaving the store, Ben always hugged you. And it wasn't that he loved you, he was patting you down. Make sure you hadn't stole anything from his store, okay? Then we went pass riding on Easter. Got your 50-cent pass, and you rode everywhere in the city that you wanted to go. You know, we didn't have Easter egg hunts. The zoo didn't allow us in for the Easter egg hunts, so we never had those. But you got your pass, you rode everywhere, and when you finished with your pass, if somebody was going to work in the morning, you gave them the pass, so they didn't have to pay and just keep on rolling. One day they built Robert A. Taft High School. What a great day. Now, Central was already built, okay? And everybody was wondering what school are they going to go to. The first graduating class was 1956. One of the other things that happened when Taft was built was all the gangs went away because everybody was in the same school and you didn't have to worry about it. The other thing about Taft was it had a dress code, and you had to be sharp if you wanted to stay in the school. Now, sometime we had boots. Once a year, you went to Jack's Surplus. Up on Central, you got your pair of combat boots and one of those flap jackets, and that was supposed to last you through the winter. Probably about February, the nails start coming up in the boots, okay? You nail them down, get you some cardboard to go in there to hold you through. But we would take those boots, take some sandpaper and suede them. We'd dye them different colors. If we had on a blue suit, we'd dye them blue. If we had on some khakis, we'd dye them brown, okay? And we did all of those type things in the school. Now, the thing about Taft is it has graduates in any field that you can name, from NASA to doctors to lawyers to entertainers all over this country and all over this world. And they were all pioneers because when we came out in '59, segregation was ending and equal opportunity was just starting to spread. So you were that first black too. And many of you in this room were. And it meant that if you want a job, you had to do well, because that meant if you failed, no other black was going to get an opportunity. So you were under a lot of pressure to do that. And Taft was a special school because of its teachers. Mr. K. Hall, we called him Little Caesar. He was firm, but he was fair. And all those teachers at Taft that loved us, nurtured us as if they were our own children, that made sure that we attended classes, that we got our homework, and that we did the things that we were supposed to do. Landis Cobb and I, we were in gym class, and you could have a little baseball team. And we didn't want to be like the Eagles or the Bears. We wanted to be bad. And the gangster at the time was Johnny Stoppanato. So we named our baseball team the Stoppanatos. And we were beating everybody. And one day we came to school and looked in the paper, and Johnny Stoppanato had gotten his throat cut in the barber chair. So we changed our name to the Lions. Now, if you went to Taft, you were in the Taft page. This was probably the foremost and best production in the city. People came from miles around to see the shows that were put on at Taft. We did Showboat, we did Carmen, we did music by Gershwin, we did every musical that you could think of at that school, because we had a lot of talent. You know, Mr. Conway would sit there at the piano with his little bald head sweating. Yeah, Mr. Parks was head of the orchestra. And we had great productions in the Taft Capades. Taft has the most professional athletes than any high school in the United States. And this is a list of a few. At the top, the first 5, there is no high school in America that has ever had the starting backfield of a football team. All of them go into the pros. And all these guys on the same team went to the pros. Sid Edwards actually led the league in rushing while he was there. Walt Johnson was all pro with the Cleveland Browns. Carl Ward, Al Nelson, Philadelphia Eagles. Jenks Martin, Jimmy Wynn, all of these people from Taft High School that went on to become professional athletes. And there were other West End professionals. George Foster was a boxing champion. Aaron Pryor, you know, as a Charles. Wallace Bud Smith, whose dad and my dad were good friends. Don Turner, who's also a trainer, and of course Jenks, who trained all types of champions, and who was a good baseball player, basketball player, athlete all around. It's Dave Parker, Tony Tubbs, and another one of Jenks' fighters, Larry Donald. When urban renewal or urban removal came, it was the end. This is my house, 1030 West 7th Street. Now, it was a place that we sit on those steps. You had to be on the steps at 8. In the summer, 8 o'clock at night, be on the steps. If you ain't on the steps, raise a strap. Basic. Okay, wasn't no arguing, wasn't no complaining. Yeah, be on the steps, okay? When Dwight Eisenhower, right after he was president, came out of the service, he took a tour of the United States and drove all the roads of the United States, because his concern and the United States' concern was, if we were invaded by a foreign government, did we have adequate roads to take care of the things we needed to do? So they decided we needed expressways because the roads were not adequate. And at certain points on that expressway, it had to be straight so planes could land. in case we needed to land planes. So they dusted off the old Queensgate plan that had sat on the tables and in the closets here in Cincinnati for a very long time, and decided it was time for us to go. Of those structures, only 4 of 2,800 residents of those houses were without building code violations. 70% were fire hazards. 2/3 were overcrowded. But that was home. We never knew that we were poor. We all shared in everything, and even when our friend Wes Sykes met us in Reno for a fight, I still had his high school sweater. And he said, well, give it to somebody else. Neither one of us can wear it now. And if you look at my junior picture in the Taft Annual and look at McKinley Hudson's picture, we wearing the same coat because it was his coat. We went to each other's houses. We ate at each other's houses. Now, some mothers told you, if you go to somebody's house and they offer you some food, say no. My grandmother didn't play that. They offer you some food, sit down and eat. And I don't have to worry about you when you come home. When the vote came for urban renewal to tear down the West End, all the whites voted no. Some voted because they thought if they tore it down, that population had to go somewhere, and they were concerned it might be their neighborhoods, so they voted no. The blacks voted yes. And they voted yes because they were told, we're going to tear this down and we're going to build you something special. And you can come back after we build you something special. And that never happened. And all those people were dispersed. Some went to the Laurel homes, some to the Lincoln courts. They built Richmond Village in Parktown, kind of pick up some. Stanley Road Towers to absorb some. A lot went to Kentucky and moved away. And what it did was destroy the connections that we had. We still knew where everybody was. We still knew where our friends were. But there was not that community cohesiveness that we knew. And subsequent to that, we had children that grew up. Then we had children having children. And it became very difficult in the black community. And a lot of people say, well, there are no black men in the family. What's up with that? If you recall, if you were on welfare, no man could be in your house. He had to leave. And they came around once a week and inspected and see if there were shoes under the bed, men's clothes in the house. If you had a new radio or television, they wanted to know where it came from. So the man was removed intentionally from the house, and he had to stay away. And once a month, he'd come back, maybe get a little money from the check, okay? Then it became that cycle. That if you had more kids, you get more money. So people start playing the game called the welfare game. And they played it, but men were absent and stayed absent for a long time. In ending, I'd just like to say, I want to thank all of you for coming. And as I said, this book is about 400 pages, covers a lot of topics about those people that started music and played music in our communities, about a lot of different things. There are 6, 7 personal stories that are in the book, one of which is mine, of growing up in the West End. Okay. Another one is my lady's story. She's Hank Ballard's daughter, and how they grew up in Cincinnati and went through all the things they went. But it's a book that I think you'll enjoy. It's full of history. It is full of memories, and I think you'll love it, and I appreciate you coming. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we'd like to do now is open up the floor for questions, for Q&A for John.
Yeah, if you got some questions.
If you have any questions, about 10 minutes. And what we're going to do then, we're going to go across the hall to what we call our Sandville dining room area. Do you
Yeah, where we'll do book signings on that side. But if you got some questions, now is the time to ask them. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Mike.